Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live didn't just spark a debate. It ignited a full-blown media firestorm. What started as a routine interview turned into one of the most jaw-dropping live confrontations ever broadcast on late-night television. The audience came expecting laughs, but what they got was a political brawl that no one could have predicted. Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General and a longtime political firebrand, stepped onto the stage like she was stepping into battle. She wore a powerful crimson blazer and a confident expression that said one thing: she wasn't here to play games. The crowd reaction was immediate and divided. Half the room clapped enthusiastically, the other half booed loudly. The energy in the studio crackled with tension before a single question was even asked. Pam took her seat and smiled politely, waving to the audience as if she couldn't hear the jeers echoing around her. But everyone could see it. She was ready. Ready for confrontation, ready to speak her mind, ready to defend everything she stood for in front of a crowd that wasn't on her side. What she didn't know was how quickly this interview would spiral into something bigger than anyone imagined. Jimmy Kimmel opened with his usual charm, tossing out a light joke about politics being more dramatic than reality TV. Pam smiled, unfazed. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Let's talk," she replied. At first, it was a fairly standard interview. They covered safe territory: gas prices, inflation, school choice. Pam kept her answers sharp and measured, delivering her talking points with the calmness of someone who's weathered political storms before. But as each question passed, you could feel the tension rising. The air was heavy. Every laugh from the crowd felt slightly sharper. Jimmy was building up to something, and then it hit. With a knowing smirk, Jimmy leaned forward and dropped the first bombshell. "Pam, do you really believe the stuff you say on TV, or are you just auditioning for your next political gig?" The audience howled with laughter. Phones were already coming out. The energy shifted. Pam didn't flinch. She took a breath, straightened her posture, and replied without blinking. "I believe in the Constitution, in law and order, and in telling the truth. Something that doesn't always get applause on shows like this." The room froze for a moment. Then half the audience burst into applause, while others booed louder. Jimmy raised an eyebrow, surprised she hadn't taken the bait, but he wasn't finished. He shot back, "Truth? That's a strong word in politics, especially from someone who defended some of the most controversial decisions in recent history." Pam's tone sharpened instantly. "It's easy to mock leadership from behind a desk," she snapped. "Maybe that's why I was in courtrooms, and you're behind cue cards." The crowd gasped. A few people clapped, but others shouted over them. You could see the camera crew shifting awkwardly. Something about the energy had shifted permanently. This wasn't light banter anymore. It was an all-out verbal clash. Trying to hold control, Jimmy chuckled and tried to bring it back to humor, but his smile looked a little more forced now. "Come on, Pam. Don't act like your party's got it all figured out. Between the chaos at the border and the endless scandals, it's hard to tell who's leading what anymore." Pam leaned in slightly, her voice firm and unwavering. "Criticism comes easy when you don't have skin in the game. My job wasn't to make jokes. It was to fight for what I believe protects this country. So what exactly do you offer, Jimmy? Other than memes, sarcasm, and cheap applause?" The crowd stirred, visibly shaken. A few people stood up. More phones came out. Backstage, producers were reportedly whispering frantically into headsets, wondering if they needed to cut to commercial. But the cameras kept rolling. Then Jimmy pulled out a clip on the giant screen behind them, an old news segment where Pam had hesitated when questioned about a controversial Florida law. The video zoomed in on her face during the awkward moment. The audience laughed, but it wasn't the same kind of laughter anymore. It felt colder, meaner. Pam didn't blink. She looked directly at the screen, then turned to Jimmy. "That's your big moment?" she said. "A 5-second clip? Edited for laughs? Maybe you should apply for a job at a cable news network. You're halfway there." The crowd exploded. Some people cheered, others booed louder. Jimmy leaned in, clearly irritated now. "You always talk about context," he said. "So what's the context for defending chaos? What's the context for twisting facts to fit a narrative?" Pam didn't back down for even a second. "The context," she said calmly, "is that your show thrives on outrage and division. You don't want answers. You want conflict. I came here to have a real discussion, but you came here to score points with jokes." Silence. Pure silence. Even the band seemed to stop playing. This wasn't an interview anymore, it was a standoff. Phones were everywhere, recording every second. A producer was overheard saying, "Should we cut?" But the director reportedly said, "No. Let it play. This is history." Pam turned to the crowd. "You don't have to agree with me," she said, her voice louder now. "But don't let a late-night host decide what's true. He's here to entertain, not to inform." The audience reacted like a storm had hit. Screams, shouts, applause, boos. It all hit at once. Jimmy tried to cut in. "Let me stop you right there," he said sharply. "If anyone's spinning the truth, it's the people who dodge every tough question and call it leadership." Pam fired back instantly. "Maybe if journalists asked real questions, I wouldn't have to dodge anything." At this point, the back and forth wasn't just fiery. It was explosive. The usual rhythm of a late-night interview had collapsed. This was a live showdown, raw and completely unfiltered. Jimmy's jokes had vanished. His posture was stiff, his eyes tense. He leaned in and said, "Pam, do you really think you're helping people? Because it looks like you're just covering for the chaos your side creates." The studio went still. The silence was louder than any applause. Pam's expression didn't change. She spoke slowly and clearly. "Say what you want about what I believe, but at least I'm not sitting behind a desk, taking shots at people who put everything on the line for what they believe in." Jimmy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. You could tell he wasn't ready for this. Pam continued, "Leadership isn't easy, it's messy, and it's not always popular. But mocking it? That's the easy part." The audience didn't know whether to cheer or stay silent. The tension was electric. Jimmy finally broke the silence. "I invited you here to have a conversation," he said, clearly frustrated now. "But it feels like you came for a fight." Pam didn't hesitate. She sat up straighter, her voice razor-sharp. "Number I came to defend the truth. If that feels like a fight to you, maybe you should stick to interviewing celebrities and leave real issues to people who can handle them." The crowd exploded again. This time people jumped to their feet. Some clapped, others booed. Many just stood frozen, watching every second. Backstage, chaos was erupting. Producers were yelling into earpieces. A voice shouted, "Cut to break!" But the director fired back again. "Don't touch it! This is going viral!" Pam stood up. She pulled off her mic and turned to the crowd. Her voice was strong, no longer polite. "I came here in good faith," she said. "But it's clear Jimmy doesn't want conversation. He wants a performance. I won't be part of a circus." Jimmy tried to regain control. "Well, that was different," he muttered with a weak smile. But it was too late. The room had flipped. The damage had been done, and everyone knew it. Within minutes, clips of the moment were all over social media. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Every platform lit up at once. Hashtags like Pam vs. Kimmel, Chaotic Walkoff, and Late Night Showdown were trending globally. Influencers reacted in real time. Political commentators scrambled to release statements. The internet couldn't get enough, and it was just the beginning. As the cameras cut to the next segment, everyone watching knew they had just seen something unforgettable. Jimmy Kimmel tried to continue the show as if nothing had happened, but his tone was off. His jokes landed flat. The crowd was distracted. still buzzing from what had just exploded across their screens. Backstage, the energy was chaotic. Studio staff ran from room to room trying to figure out how to handle the PR disaster unfolding in real time. One producer was heard saying, "We didn't expect that, not from her." But the damage had already been done. No amount of spin could undo what millions had just seen live. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi was already trending worldwide. Footage of her walking off stage was everywhere. TikTok users posted clips with captions like, "She didn't flinch. Pam just took down Jimmy on his own turf." Twitter erupted with debates. Some called her a hero, others accused her of playing the victim, but no one could deny it. She had stolen the spotlight completely. Political analysts jumped in quickly. Conservative networks praised her for standing her ground and refusing to be steamrolled. One pundit said, "She came armed with facts and composure, and left with the upper hand." Liberal commentators, on the other hand, called her overly defensive and accused her of deflecting real questions. But even critics were forced to admit that she kept her cool in a pressure cooker situation. By morning, every major news outlet was covering the story. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. All of them led with headlines about the showdown. Some described it as a meltdown. Others called it a cultural moment. The divide was sharp, but the interest, universal. Everyone had an opinion. Nobody was ignoring it. On talk radio, callers flooded the lines. People argued about who was right, who went too far, and what it meant for late-night TV. Listeners didn't agree on much, but they all agreed on one thing. This wasn't your average interview. This was something different, something explosive. That afternoon, Pam Bondi reappeared in public for the first time since the walk-off. She stepped in front of a microphone at a press event in Florida and faced the reporters with her usual confidence. When one asked if she regretted how the interview ended, she smiled calmly and said, "No regrets. I walked in with respect and walked out with my dignity intact." That quote hit headlines like a thunderclap. Newsrooms across the country plastered it across their websites and broadcasts. Editorials were already being written about what her words meant. The press room where she spoke fell quiet after that line. She didn't linger. She answered a few more questions about state policy, then moved on, like nothing had happened. Cool, controlled, untouchable. Jimmy Kimmel returned to his show that same evening with noticeably different energy. His usual confidence was there, but it felt like something was missing. The sparkle in his eye had dimmed. The band played his intro music. The crowd cheered. But something in the air had changed. He opened the monologue with a half-hearted joke. "Not sure if I should thank Pam for the ratings boost or apologize to my crew for the heart attack?" The audience laughed, but not as loudly, not as freely. Some even hesitated. Kimmel's producers were reportedly already in damage control mode. Some sponsors were said to be rethinking ad placement. The fallout was real, and it was only just beginning. Behind the scenes, internal meetings were taking place. Executives were asking serious questions about guest prep, tone, and risk. One insider leaked that several show staffers believed the walkout had rattled the brand. Another admitted, "We underestimated her. That won't happen again." Other late-night hosts took notice too. Some came to Jimmy's defense, calling it a tough night and praising him for taking risks. But even among comedians there were private murmurs. Some said he should have let her speak, that it wasn't a comedy bit anymore. It was an ambush. That line between satire and confrontation had been crossed. A few days later, Jimmy addressed the moment directly during a more serious segment. Looking straight into the camera, he said, "I've always tried to use this show to entertain and sometimes challenge people, but I realize now that what happened with Pam wasn't my finest moment. I let my frustration get ahead of the conversation. For that, I'm sorry." That apology circulated almost as quickly as the walkout clip. His fans praised the humility. Others said it was too little, too late. Pam Bondi didn't fire back. She simply posted one sentence during a live Q&A later that week. "That's what grown-ups do. They own their mistakes." The internet exploded again. Her response was seen as subtle, strong, and devastatingly effective. No yelling, no name-calling, just poise. Her comment sections filled with people of all backgrounds saying things like, "I don't agree with her politics, but she was real, and that was class."